There's no doubt that one of the main contributing factors to Fortnite's success upon the launch of its Battle Royale playlist was the unique building mechanic that came with this BR. People very early on fell in love with building in Fortnite, and rather than the game being known as a shooter with a building mechanic, the game was played as a building game with a shooting mechanic. This overall proved to have a large amount of positives for the game, not only boosting its popularity because of how unique it was, but also creating a higher sense of replayability, as every match could have fights that were incredibly unique because of this mechanic. However, over time this mechanic would cause a lot of issues for the game, as the skill ceiling was rapidly increasing as most players were getting better and better utilizing the building mechanic to the largest degree. Now, while I agree that this rapid acceleration in player skill level with the building mechanic mainly had to do with playgrounds and creative style modes, allowing for players to practice their mechanics for hours on end, players having an increase in skill level over time is an inevitability, and Creative and Playground's playlists only made it so that this problem that Epic would have to tackle had just come much sooner than it does in most games. The main issue that stands with having the average player having a very large amount of skill is that it makes it more difficult for casual players or players who don't play the game as frequently to have the chance of having a good experience through winning a game or even getting eliminations. Epic originally saw this issue and responded very poorly by adding weapons that a less than average player could pick up and use to their advantage by potentially getting a free or easy kill on someone by doing a quick 200-0 with a spray weapon, for example. This of course would prove to be a very negative thing, and Epic later on, during Chapter 1, specifically late Season 7, decided to add the first competitive playlist known as Arena. And while Arena in Chapter 3 and part of Chapter 4 wasn't a good playlist, during its original edition, it was due to the fact that it gave players more incentive to play the mode, rather than playing something like the public lobby playlist. Because the number of players interested in competitive as well as just above average players was at an all-time high, this allowed for much higher selection when it came to playing the game competitively. This meant that if you were trying to find a lobby where you were being placed up against a player of a similar skill level to you, it was much easier because there was a larger number of players to select from. Unfortunately, the Arena playlist from the beginning was very flawed and was only carried by the number of players that were playing the game back in 2019. And while this video isn't dedicated to the downfall of Arena, it should go without saying that the Arena playlist no longer acted as a way to stop pub stompers, as there was no incentive to play the mode. However, in Chapter 3 Season 2, Epic made the bold decision of outright removing the building mechanic from the public lobbies playlist. This ultimately was a test from Epic to see how the community might react to a playlist, or even potentially the game, in a permanent no-building state. While Epic ultimately decided on dedicating the no-build mode to a separate playlist known as Zero Build, the test was a major success with the majority of players enjoying this new playlist. Many players who had not played the game in a significant portion of time, such as Tfue, Nick Mercs, Tim the Tatman, and many more, began playing the game again simply because there was now a way to get back into the game again without having to relearn the building mechanic. Even a good number of pre-existing players who hadn't left the game were beginning to play more no builds than playing the normal building playlist. Now, I'll be honest, I myself have never been a big fan of no builds. For me, the main thing that makes Fortnite so unique is the building aspect, and without it I don't really enjoy playing the game as much. However, when this playlist originally came out, I did really enjoy playing my fair share of no builds. I mainly enjoyed it because it was like re-experiencing the game again for the first time, as the playstyle for this mode was incredibly different to that of the building playlist. The interesting thing about the no builds playlist that Epic couldn't effectively achieve with the original playlist was the fact that there was no longer such a high skill floor for trying to play the game. People who had spent a long time away from Fortnite can now play the playlist where they wouldn't have to relearn how to build just to play the game again. These players could simply pick it back up like it was any other battle royale or shooter game and return to it with no issue of forgetting how to perform such an important mechanic because there was now a playlist that made it irrelevant. To say that no builds is a perfect mode for returning or even casual players is an understatement, but this didn't mean the mode couldn't be competitive. Because the only thing removed from this playlist was the ability to build, certain utility, weapons, and vehicles became a big deal again with this major rework. While it's true that the skill floor for no builds is incredibly low when compared to the building playlist, this doesn't mean that the skill ceiling for the mode is very low as well. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's anywhere near the building playlist in terms of the skill ceiling. However, because of the different mobility, utility, and weapons around the map, as I had mentioned prior, a lot of players began to realize that you could use some of these different aspects of the game very heavily to your advantage. With this, you would see players such as Tfue constantly using vehicles to tank damage and get easy rotation, or porta forts to strategically set up positioning, and because of this more competitive side to the mode, Epic began implementing tournaments surrounding the playlist, creating a more competitive scene for an already thriving mode. Ultimately, Zero Build created a different perspective on the game for not only pre-existing players, but also new players, because it offered not only such a casual, friendly experience, but also such an interesting take on competitive Fortnite. I would like to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you enjoy the Zero Builds playlist, or are you more of a building player yourself? I personally play more builds just because I enjoy using the mechanic a lot more. However, I can definitely see the argument for liking no builds more just as a playlist, simply because you don't have to constantly be practicing your mechanics in creative lobbies, which is something that over time can become incredibly boring. Season 4 does drop in a few days, so I will be doing an initial review on that season when it comes out and talking about the stuff that I do and don't like about it, as well as making a review when the season of course ends. Anyways, thank you for watching and have a great day.